Now, the Pharmaceutical Society of Ireland, the pharmacy regulator, has published guidance for pharmacists on the safe supply to patients of non-prescription medicines which contain codeine. And from August 1st, that's next week, all pharmacists and retail pharmacy businesses will be required to comply with the guidance in full, including that these products must be stored out of public view and in an area under the direct control of the pharmacist. I'm joined on the line by Darragh O'Loughlin, who's the president of the Irish Pharmacy Union based in Galway. Darragh, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. What are we talking about here? Nurofen, Solpadeine, things like that?
Nurofen Plus, Solpadeine, Sindol, Unifu Plus, Vegenin, and a number of different cough bottles and cold and flu remedies. But the primary ones would be pain relievers such as Solpadeine and Nurofen Plus. Okay,
so do we need restrictions to tighten up their sale?
Well, there are health implications to taking pain relievers which contain codeine or any medication with codeine in it for too long a period of time, or taking them at too high a dose, because codeine is an opiate, which means from a chemical perspective it's related to other opiates such as opium, morphine, heroin. Now obviously it's nowhere near as strong as any of those, but it still has the potential to cause physical and psychological dependence if it's used in excess of the recommended doses. So the purpose of the new guidelines on the safe supply of these medications is to ensure that the medicines will still be available to patients who need them and patients for whom they're suitable for the particular condition they want to treat, but to try and reduce or eliminate the potential for abuse and harmful misuse of these medicines.
Is there a suggestion here so that a lot of people might be using these that don't need them and maybe using too much of them?
Well, there is a risk. And the drug addiction treatment people are saying that they have seen an increase in the number of people presenting to them who have developed problems with dependency problems relating to codeine and non-prescription medicines containing codeine. So it's more of a safety thing. The numbers wouldn't be enormous, but because the risk exists, the best balance, I think, between putting them on prescription only or leaving them outside is to just ensure that nobody uses these medications without first having a consultation with the pharmacist. So they'll still be available, but patients will have to consult with the pharmacist, who will then, having spoken to them and spoken about their symptoms and what it is they're trying to treat, will be in a position to advise them whether that is the best treatment for them or whether they'd be better off with a first-line painkiller that doesn't contain codeine, something that might be just paracetamol or ibuprofen, an anti-inflammatory. Because very often, I suppose, people mightn't even be aware of what the ingredients are in a non-prescription medicine. They're just buying it by brand name. They figure it does the trick for them and they don't give too much thought to what's in it.
Or if you see something that says plus or whatever else it might say, you might think, well, this is going to be better.
Exactly, yes. And it's a human reaction. If it says plus or it says extra, you think, well, that's the one I want. That's obviously the strongest one. I should be using the best. And what can happen with persistent use of pain relievers like that is if you're using them for persistent headaches, for example, they can actually make the headaches worse. As the painkiller wears off, the headache will come back worse than it was before.
Really?
And that can lead to repeated dosing with the medication, which is what causes people ultimately to develop a tolerance and then a dependence. Nobody goes out thinking, oh, I must, develop a drug problem. But what actually happens is they overuse a pain reliever, not knowing that it is the painkiller itself that's causing the headaches.
You could actually become an addict here, well, without knowing it.
Yes, because the symptom of the withdrawal is a headache, but you just think you have a headache, so you need to go for your Solpadeine or your pain reliever again.
Right. Now, what's going to happen from August the 1st, say next week, if I go in to ask for Solpadeine or Nurofen Plus? What will happen?
Well, firstly, when you go into the pharmacy, you won't be able to see them. They'll all have been taken off the shelves and they'll be in an area of the dispensary where you can't see them. And you'll have to speak with the pharmacist, who will ask you what it is you're using them for, warn you about the dangers of misuse or overuse, and establish whether it is Solpadeine that you really need or Nurofen Plus that you really need, or whether perhaps you might be better off with a medication that just contains one ingredient, because most of the codeine medicines actually have a number of ingredients. They also have paracetamol or aspirin or ibuprofen in them, and those medicines also have the potential to be harmful if they're used inappropriately or at excessive doses. And very often the particular kind of pain you have might respond better to a single ingredient pain reliever without needing to go for the stronger one.
Okay, and what kind of questions will you be asked then?
What are your symptoms? Have you tried taking anything yet? And then if it's Nurofen that you were thinking of getting, the pharmacist would ask whether you have ever had stomach ulcers, because stomach ulcers can be an issue with a lot of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. The pharmacist will point out what ingredients are in the medication that you're considering so that you will know whether you have already taken them. So you might say, well, I've tried Panadol, it didn't do the trick, so I want to take Saltadine. At least the pharmacist will be able to say, well, there's paracetamol in both of them, so you need to leave it 6 or 8 hours before you go from one to the other.
Right.
It'll just be safety issues around safe use of medication and establishing what your symptoms are, so the pharmacist can be satisfied that that medication that you're looking for is the correct one for you.
What happens if you say, look, I've always used this, this is the one I need, I want it, simple as that, can you give it to me? Will the pharmacist just be able to hand it over?
The pharmacist is only going to give it to you if they believe that it's appropriate for you to be using that medication. It's not simply going to be a case of you demanding it, and if you demand it in quite a trenchant tone of voice, the pharmacist will just back down. The guidelines are obligatory. The pharmacist has no choice but to follow them. So if there is no purpose in having a row with the pharmacist because you want something that he or she believes isn't necessarily appropriate at this time.
What reaction are these new rules getting from your members, Darragh, in the pharmacy union? Are pharmacists in favour of this?
Well, pharmacists very much understand why we need to have safety and precautions around the use of these medications, especially because codeine can be potentially addictive. The pharmacists themselves want to ensure that patients are only using the medicines that they need and that they're using them safely. And the question of having to hide the medicines in the dispensary so the customers can't see them, the pharmacists are probably a little bit more ambiguous about whether or not that's entirely necessary, because obviously if a patient has to deal directly with the pharmacist before they can have them, it's probably irrelevant whether they can see the medication or not. Right.
And I suppose it does emphasise the point that you can ask advice from your pharmacist and that's what they're there for. So I suppose that's probably a good thing for the business.
It's a good thing, and it's a good thing for the public to know that the pharmacist is there. The pharmacist is a health professional who can provide advice on all medication and health-related issues without having to make an appointment or pay consultation fees and so on. And pharmacists are there 6 and sometimes 7 days a week. It's a resource that many people use, but a lot of other members of the public don't realise that it's there for them. And we're very much in favour of anything that helps people to realise that we as pharmacists are there to help people with all their health and medication issues.
And obviously there might be some confusion about this next week when people go into their pharmacy and ask for whatever maybe they were used to buying over the counter. What kind of a reaction do you think it'd get from the public?
I'd say some people will probably, because it's going to lead to a delay, or people will feel they're being delayed because now they have to talk to the pharmacist and explain what they're using it for. I imagine that some members of the public will probably be irritated by it, and those who don't have any problems with medication might wonder why suddenly they're being subjected to what might feel like an interrogation. And what we'd like to make sure people realise is it isn't an interrogation, it isn't a judgment thing, and they're not being accused of being addicted to anything. It's just a question of pharmacists being obliged now to satisfy themselves that this patient is somebody who definitely needs this medication and that it isn't a stronger medication that they need.
That's where we leave it for now. Darragh, thank you for joining us. Darragh O'Loughlin is president of the Irish Pharmacy Union and he's a Galway-based pharmacist as well.